Oh, hey. Well, hello.
We're back.
We are definitely back. Another version. Another day, another dollar.
So today we're going to try and tell people what might be useful with regards to interviewing, predominantly from an academic standpoint. So Cheyenne and I have got experience of being interviewed, going
Mm-hmm.
from a PhD student to a postdoc, and I've got some experience of going from a postdoc into a faculty position. And Cheyenne's got some experience of how that interviewing process might differ in industry. So basically speaking, we're going to try and give you some hints and tips. How can you improve your chances of getting an offer through the interview process? And we're thinking this could be separated into things you might do before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. And as I said, we'll talk, I think, predominantly from an academic standpoint, but Cheyenne's got a bit of experience from an industrial standpoint, and also from a philanthropic standpoint and a fundraising standpoint. Um, so before the interview,
Should
in
we
my head,
start charging like a 10% royalty fee for anyone who watches
you
our
are, you
video?
are.
If they watch
The,
our videos and they
the,
land a
and
successful
what will that money go
position,
towards?
uh, we can start a travel award, you know?
I was going to say, I thought you were going to say the Higgsfield tokens.
Or, I mean, travel award. Let's keep
Travel
it a
awards, yeah,
little,
maybe
yeah, we
one
can
day.
do maybe one day, hopefully. But yeah, so yeah, this is an interesting area of topic. A lot of people are struggling with that. I see a lot of people who get to points that they get to the interview, but they never get past the interview
Hmm.
because maybe on paper you're very good, maybe the things that you are offering on paper are extremely good, but at the same time there is a good portion that depends on you presenting
Yeah,
what you put on the paper. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I guess our aim is because it's very normal, isn't it, to be invited to interview more times than you get offers. So our hope is that we can improve your ratio of number of offers to number of interviews.
Yes.
So for me, the first things that spring to mind with regards to what you can do before interviewing, and it's kind of tedious process, but I think research is key. So figuring out things like if you're a postdoc interviewing for a faculty position, who is it that's going to be in your department and who is it that's going to be interviewing you? And I think that's
Hmm.
important because you can then talk about how your techniques and your projects can complement what's already going on in the department. And you can also bring in ideas that might be relevant to the people that are actually interviewing you. And that can, in theory, help in two ways. It can help prove how well you fit with the department that you're applying into, and it can also impress the interviewers with regards to their level of belief in you as a
Hmm.
person. So I for sure think you should find out what it is that the other people that are interviewing you are doing in their research and how is it that your research could help complement them. And that's from a faculty perspective. And then from a student going into a postdoc perspective, I also think the research is important because you can find out, for example, what exact techniques and projects are going on in the PI's lab. And again, start to reiterate how you can help that. And you can also find out things like where the alumni of the lab have since gone on
Hmm.
to go with regards to their careers. And that will help you with regards to finding out how successful the PI has been, but it'll also help the PI potentially have a fond appreciation of your research with regards to what you found out about them in their lab. So yeah,
Yeah,
do your
yeah.
research for sure is an important thing to do before the interview.
Kind of to piggyback on that, the other important thing that is kind of like exactly related to what you said, either you're doing a postdoc interview or obviously a faculty interview, is that knowing what type of research is in the department that you're going to give a talk or do the interview is good, but at the same time, you also need to know that if you're talking about a particular area of expertise or like that particular paper or that particular research that has been done in that institution, but the people in the audience acknowledge that, hey, yes, it has been shown by Dr. X, Dr. Y, which is in the audience, that, hey, back in 2002, there was this interesting article or this interesting technique developed here that we have been using that shifted the field toward like some new direction or things like that. So it
Yeah.
shows that you're completely aware of what's going on in the field and how people are creating new angles or new questions and how they're answering
Yeah.
it.
So it's not a bad thing to talk about their frenemies, in other words. It's okay to talk about their competitors, obviously with an emphasis on what's going on in their lab or their department. And actually,
Absolutely.
an even more granular level, this has occurred to me as a result of my recent but fairly limited experience as a member of a selection committee for a faculty position. There's nothing stopping you from asking the chair of the selection committee or the department chair approximately how many questions are going to be asked, how long is the interview going to be, and
That's a
what
good
sort of
point.
topics are going to be covered. Because the very worst case scenario, they'll tell you politely, I'm afraid we can't divulge this information. But they might tell you approximately how many questions are going to be asked and how long the interview is
Hmm.
going to be. And then that will allow you to structure in your mind approximately how long each of your answers should be. Because what you don't want to do is spend 50% or more of the allocated time during the interview on one question, because that'll stop you
Sure.
from being able to give you a fair, accurate representation of you as a person and also as a potential candidate. So I would advise people to communicate with the department chair or the chair of the selection committee in advance to find out what might be asked and how many questions.
That's actually a really great point. I personally didn't really have that in mind whenever I want to do interview. Yes, I think it's absolutely important because you want to make sure that you have enough time to showcase your breadth of knowledge and how you can uh, face challenges that you're being faced when they ask you tough questions. So if you're just focusing on one question too much and do not let
Right,
anyone else ask you the question, yeah, that's a great point. Good point.
right. And related to that, again, it sounds a bit weird, but you can practice. So before the interview,
Sure.
I think it is a good idea to practice answering the sorts of typical questions that you might get in an interview for a postdoctoral position or a faculty position. And I think that's important for a number of reasons. One is that it'll allow you to feel more comfortable when you're going into the interview,
Hmm.
but it will also allow you to structure your answers. So in my head, I'm more confident in the candidate if they provide a fairly succinct answer, but a structured answer that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it
Hmm.
doesn't feel to me like their answers are meandering down a pathway that they don't know where it's going. In other words, you could, for example, say, um, yeah, I have three reasons primarily why I applied for this position. They are X, Y, and Z. And then you describe in more detail X, Y, and Z. And at the end, you say, yeah, so they were the three reasons X, Y, and Z that I
Hmm.
applied for this job. And I don't think people think too carefully about that, but I do think it's one of the things that allow you to come across in more professional light, a more competent light. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is have as many people as possible on the panel favor you, right? So I think an
Yes,
organized answer
absolutely.
is key.
Yeah, and kind of like going back to the practice point, since we're doing like all the AI things and everything. From a practice perspective, in old days, you would stand in front of a mirror and then trying to do the practice.
I know
Right
you
now,
still do that, Cheyenne. I know you
I
do.
do. It's fun, you know. But yeah, there are new tools that you can use. I think obviously any sorts of large language model, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, you can start talking to them as a practice and be like, hey, put it on the voice mode and be like, hey, I'm trying to do like a 5 minute practice for answering these types of questions. Give me feedback, and they're actually pretty decent. And if you're doing a presentation like a PowerPoint presentation, there is this feature inside the PowerPoint that is the presentation coaching and that you can turn on when you put it on the presenter mode, and then it starts track your time, tracks your pace, tracks your reasoning logic in a sense, and gives you feedback in a format of a score, if I remember correctly. So these
Okay.
are tools that you can definitely utilize to at least get some sort of feedback. Or if you have like spare time, you can just waste the dinner time with your significant other and be like,
Right,
"Hey,
right, right. It,
can you try to be my interviewer for this type of position or
yeah.
these type of questions?" And then
Yeah.
obviously you have to compensate that somehow. Uh, Maybe a nice gift or a nice dinner or something like
Yeah. Well,
that.
and you also have to pick your audience carefully because you want someone that you trust who's able to give you valid feedback. But yeah, the
Exactly.
point being, it is useful to practice. And partly because, for example, it occurred to me one of the harder questions in an interview is actually just to introduce yourself. Okay, so I've quite often found that after the panel has introduced themselves, they'll give the applicant an opportunity to introduce themselves. It's very easy to answer that question, again, in a meandering way that it starts with yourself, your education, your career, starts talking about your research, and then all of a sudden you're down into a rabbit hole and you don't know how to get back out again. Actually, the introduction question, in my experience, is best answered if you just give a series of highlights of what you've achieved and in chronological order, how you've got from where you started to where you are now. Because the next questions will be and about your project. So my advice would be to give a fairly short introduction, because that's not actually one of the questions.
Basically, have an elevator pitch ready at all
Yeah,
times.
it is in effect
Have
an
one
elevator
elevator pitch for yourself.
Right. Be aware that the introduction is the introduction, and just make sure that you're actually answering the question that's been asked. I think people fall short in that regard sometimes. Another point to mention, I think, looking at you, Cheyenne, for example, you're always fairly well presented. I don't think you can overdress for an interview. So if you're torn between something that's slightly less formal or something that's slightly more formal, I would personally always advise you to go for the slightly more formal look. Might be somewhat old-fashioned. I think you want to be relaxed, of course, during the interview, but you also want to present yourself in the best possible light.
Yeah, any good thing that you can be remembered with, it's always a plus. Either it's like the way that you're presenting yourself, your professional attire, the conversations that you have, the small talks that you have with the trainees, all these little things to leave a positive impression are extremely helpful. And kind of going back to the interview question, I think one of the other portions are what I like to call them hidden interviews. That yes, you go to department for a faculty position, for a postdoc position, even for like a PhD student position, like an admission to a program. Yes, there are the official people who are interviewing you with a certain set of questions that have been through your application, so on and so forth. But there is also always a lot of departments, a lot of places are doing that. There is like time set aside for you to hang out with your peers, the students, the trainees that are in that environment. And it's not an official meeting. It's rather an unofficial, like very relaxed setting for you to sit down, chit chat, and have conversations with people who are living in that department in a sense. And I personally think that that should be also considered as some sort of an interview, because there is always I mean, let's say, for example, I'm sitting in a room with six other trainees, and we are talking to a faculty candidate, and we're just having a conversation with them about their research, how they think about research, how they think about the environment, what are their expectations. And then I stumbled upon the chair of the department, and he asked me, hey, what do you think about this guy? And I have to give an honest feedback to the chair of the department. And that kind of is like an unofficial feedback that I'm pretty sure feeds back inside the assessment that at the end of the day will evaluate you with regard to whether you're a good fit for that program, that position, or not.
And actually, again, in my limited experience, what we do as a department is we take the opinions of everyone on board when we're deciding on which candidate to progress with. And I think that sort of scenario is important for a few reasons. One is that you can effectively sell yourself and your ability to fit within the department, because there are often worries about whether or not someone's a good fit. And to me, that's defined by what you can offer the department, but also what the department can offer you. So how can you help them and how can they help you? And the sorts of scenarios you're talking about there are important forums through which you can encourage them to believe that you are a good fit effectively. And you can use evidence and research and techniques, etc. But you can also use your conversational skills. And that doesn't come terribly easy to everyone. But my advice in that regard is that if you're in a situation like a lunch with graduate students or an informal conversation with postdocs, whether you like it or not, people like talking about themselves and their work. So if you ask questions about what they're doing, it will prove to them that you're inquisitive and interested. And hopefully that'll also encourage them to believe that you're someone that's suitable and appropriate and are decent to work with in an everyday working environment, because ultimately that's what's going to happen, isn't it? You're going to move into their
Hmm.
department and they want someone that's friendly and intelligent, etc., to work around. So I totally agree that that's a good example of a situation that you can try and not manipulate, but what's the word? Use to your
Utilize the
advantage.
setting to show
Yeah,
another angle of
use
your
to your
strength.
advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't have too much more to say about the academic interviews. I do think after the academic interviews, it's polite to follow up and thank people for their time, particularly if you've talked about something. For example, you might have mentioned a paper that they hadn't seen or a technique that they hadn't seen. You can follow up with regards to what that paper or
Hmm.
technique is with the individual person, and then hope for the best. I interviewed over the course of a weekend with a company in management consultancy a long time ago. Thankfully, I didn't choose that career path. But outside of academia, I haven't got much by way of experience of working in industry, etc. What was it you were going to tell people about how you think you can tailor your application or your interview style with regards to industry as opposed to academia?
Well, obviously, there are similar structures or similar core principles that you need to have, regardless of whatever you're interviewing for. I mean, the confidence, carrying yourself, and being confident in who you are and the technical capabilities that you're bringing to the table. So, those are the things that are obviously core principles that, regardless of where you go, you should have that. But some of the interesting things that I've learned is that. The I don't want to call it the attention span, but the way that the people in industrial settings pay attention to things are completely different than academia. If I want to put it very simply, is that for an academic position, you send in a CV, which could be 10, 20, 30, 40 pages long. But
Mhm.
for an industrial setting, you're sending it 1 to 2 page max if you are like crazy good 3 page resume. So that kind of shows the way that people are looking at things. You want to be tailored to what's needed in that specific position, particularly. In my limited experience with industry, one of the things that people look at is that how you can move the team forward, not how you establish yourself. In academia, we're like, okay, how we're going to start an independent research program and how we can build something from scratch. And then after that, we contribute to the department, to the mission of the college, and so on and so forth. But in industry, from day one, I believe one of the major things that they look for is that how much of a good team member you are. How can you make sure that the project moves forward?
Yeah.
How can you contribute to making the client happy? How you can make sure that things are getting to the deadline? So those are the things that are important, and things are much shorter. One of the interesting things that I have experienced is that I don't know if I'm talking to an academic person, I tend to explain things. I tend to have a loose end with the conversation. I'm like, okay, yeah, we did this, we did that, and then at the end of the day, we did look at this, look at that, and this was the result. But if I'm talking to an industrial person, I'm like, this was the result. And if you're interested in how we get to the results, we can talk about that. But this is the punchline. This is what we achieved. So it's industry is very result driven. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. And actually, that's what I was going to reiterate again in my minimum experience. It seemed to me like they like you to show evidence of starting, doing, and finishing a project. So they need to know
Exactly.
what's your
Exactly.
productivity based on and how have you completed this project or this project or this project.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more cutthroat, but yeah, as you say, there's certainly some principles that will overlap from one of the aspects to another. And then you reminded me then to say what's the principle? You can Google this. Is it the STAR principle or whatever it is? Specific.
It's specific.
Yeah. So I feel like that sort of thing's key in industry. Yeah, to show exactly what you've done and how you've done it and provide evidence for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then kind of related to that, I've seen this more in industrial setting is that you need to show you're an extremely phenomenal good troubleshooter. Because in academic settings, you always have some sort of a mentor. If you're a junior faculty, you are mentored by senior faculty. If you're a postdoc, you have your PI that you're working with, or senior postdocs. If you're a PhD student, there's always a senior PhD or a postdoc that you can. So there's always these safety nets in a sense that you
Right.
can go after to make sure that you can find a solution to the problem that you
Yeah.
have. But in industry, you are the person who needs to figure things out and you need to troubleshoot. it's kind of sometimes it's okay, but in general, my personal feeling is that it's kind of like a negative if you're just trying to find solution to problems that you have without you even trying or without you even showing that you're willing to go through everything, exhausting all the options. And then for any particular reason, which would be lack of knowledge in the domain expertise, you just couldn't handle this. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay
Yeah,
to ask for advice, but not from the scratch or from the beginning.
no, but that's a good point actually. Um, One, to provide evidence of your troubleshooting abilities and to show the solutions that you're able to come towards. And also a good idea, I think, there is whether it's academia or industry, ask people that have been through the process fairly recently for their advice. And so they're the
Yes.
sort of people that will be able to give you the most up-to-date questions, what's being asked, what's important to talk about, what's important to be aware of. So if you have near peers in academia or industry, they're a good source of knowledge. And so yeah, I'd encourage people to ask their near peers as well. And then of course there's an element of luck. You need to apply for positions you think you're suitable for, and hopefully one or more of them will provide you with an offer that you're happy with. But yeah, the idea of doing the research, tailoring your job application, etc., that's part of the process that needs to be done. There's no avoiding that. And then hopefully, based on what we've just told you, you'll be able to present yourself in the best possible light during the interview. So yeah,
That's the
I'd
goal.
say I'd say good luck to everyone, unless you've got anything else to add, Cheyenne.
Well, I
Yeah,
think there is
we
a
hope we've
huge
provided
difference.
at least some useful information coming
Yeah,
from a
so
perspective where we've been obviously interviewed ourselves from an academic standpoint to get to where we are and have had some experience of interviewing. And yeah,
yeah, well, yeah,
make use of
so
all the possible resources that are out there available for you.
there is going to be a huge difference between whoever's watching this video before and thereafter. So you would not get any interview, you would not get any job
Let,
offers. But now that you spend 10, 15 minutes with us, you're going to get it all. So yeah.
let's keep believing that, Shahan, shall we? Yeah, I like that. I like
Well,
that.
no, I wish everyone a lot of luck. It's really wild out there these days, either academia or industry. So many volatile things happening, so many uncertainties. So
Yeah,
either if you're going after academia or industry, yeah, it's a tough world out there these days.
true,
So I wish everyone.
but that doesn't stop you from doing everything in your power to improve your chances. So yeah,
Exactly,
do what you can,
exactly.
and I'd say good luck.
Yes. The only bad move is not having a move
No
in a
move.
sense. Or
Yeah,
no move, yeah.
well said.
Pardon my English as second language here.
You're learning, Sean. I'm teaching. I'm
I'm
teaching you
trying.
every
I'm
day.
trying, man.
Every day I'm learning
I'm
too.
starting to develop the British accent a little bit.
All right. See you next time.
Well, cheers everyone. Thanks for watching us. Like, share, subscribe. As always.
Oh.